The restaurant hummed with the practiced symphony of wealth. Crystal glasses, chiming delicate toasts, leather soles clicking against marble floors, hushed conversations punctuated by calculated laughter. But at table 17, tucked in the corner where shadows pooled like spilled ink, Marcus Wellington heard none of it. He never did. For 23 years, silence had been his constant companion. Arriving uninvited the night a drunk driver stole more than just his hearing. It had taken his wife, his unborn daughter, and every sound he'd once taken for granted. The accident had left him with a fortune from the settlement, but money couldn't buy back laughter, couldn't purchase the memory of his wife's voice saying his name. So Marcus did what he'd done every Tuesday evening for the past decade. He sat alone in the city's finest restaurant, eating food he couldn't taste, surrounded by people he couldn't hear, wondering if this was all that remained of living. The servers knew him as the deaf millionaire who tipped extravagantly and spoke to no one. They'd learned to communicate through carefully written notes and exaggerated gestures, though most simply avoided his table altogether. It was easier that way, less uncomfortable. Marcus had grown accustomed to being the obstacle people navigated around, the inconvenience they'd rather not acknowledge. He'd made peace with invisibility, or so he told himself each night as he returned to his empty penthouse, overlooking a city full of sounds he'd never hear again. But tonight something was different. Rosa Delgado pushed her cleaning cart down the restaurant's back hallway, her arms aching from a double shift, her eyes burning with exhaustion. The baby carrier strapped to her chest bounced gently with each step, and inside it, 9-month-old Sophia slept with her tiny fist curled against her cheek. Rosa whispered a prayer of gratitude that her daughter had finally settled down. The daycare had called in sick. Her sister couldn't babysit, and Rosa had no choice but to bring Sophia to work. One more violation of company policy. One more reason Mr. Hendricks could fire her, but what else could she do? A single mother didn't have the luxury of choices. She'd immigrated from El Salvador 3 years ago with nothing but hope stitched into the lining of her worn suitcase. She'd learned English from library books, learned to clean from YouTube videos, learned to survive from sheer necessity. Sophia was her miracle, her reason for rising before dawn and collapsing after midnight. Every floor she mopped, every toilet she scrubbed, every table she wiped down, it was all for the little girl sleeping. Against her heart, dreaming dreams that Rosa prayed would be bigger than these narrow hallways. The restaurant was supposed to be closed for cleaning by now, but Rosa noticed the light still glowing in the dining room. She peered through the porthole, window in the kitchen door, and saw him, the man at table 17. She'd seen him before, always alone, always still, like a statue carved from loneliness. Her supervisor had warned her to stay clear of the dining area until he left. But Sophia was stirring, making the small whimpering sounds that preceded a full-blown cry. Rosa needed to move quickly, to finish her work before her daughter's hunger overtook her patience. She decided to risk it. The dining room was large enough. She could clean the far section, stay out of his way, be invisible. She was good at being invisible. Marcus noticed her immediately, of course. The young woman with the baby strapped to her chest, pushing a cleaning cart with wheels that probably squeaked. She kept her head down, moved with the efficient grace of someone who'd learned to make herself small in the world. He recognized the posture. It was how he moved through life now, too, trying not to take up too much space, trying not to be a burden. He returned his attention to his untouched dessert, some elaborate chocolate creation that looked like edible architecture. He picked up his fork, then set it down again. What was the point? He couldn't remember the last time food had brought him pleasure. He couldn't remember the last time anything had. Then he felt it, the vibration of footsteps approaching. Heavier than before, uncertain. He looked up to find the cleaning woman standing a few feet from his table, her hands moving in gestures he didn't immediately understand. Then she pressed her palms together in front of her face, bowed her head slightly, and pointed toward the baby carrier. Her face held an apology, a request, and something else, desperation. Marcus understood. She was asking if the baby would disturb him. He shook his head no, then gestured for her to continue her work, surprised by the small, warm feeling the interaction sparked in his chest. Someone had asked him something. Someone had seen him. Rosa exhaled in relief and returned to her cart, but Sophia had other plans. The baby's eyes opened, her face scrunched, and a cry erupted from her tiny body with the force of every grievance she'd collected. In her 9 months of existence, Rosa froze, mortification flooding through her. She fumbled with the carrier, trying to extract Sophia, trying to soothe her, trying to make her daughter's needs disappear, the way she'd learned to make her own disappear. But babies don't understand invisibility. Babies demand to be seen, heard, acknowledged. Sophia's cries escalated, echoing off the restaurant's high ceilings, and Rosa's eyes filled with tears. This was it. She'd be fired. She'd lose this job like she'd lost the last one when Sophia got sick and Rosa had missed too many shifts. How would they survive? The rent was already 2 weeks late. She started to gather her things, preparing for the walk of shame back to Mr. Hendricks's office, when she felt a presence beside her. The man from table 17 stood there, and he was smiling. Actually smiling. He held out his hands in a gesture so clear that Rosa understood immediately. He was offering to hold Sophia. Rosa's first instinct was to refuse. You didn't hand your baby to strangers, no matter how expensive their suits. But something in his eyes stopped her, a kindness that seemed to reach across the chasm of their different worlds. And Sophia was getting heavier, her cries more insistent. And Rosa's arms were so tired. She passed her daughter to him, and Marcus took the baby with the careful reverence of someone holding something infinitely precious. Sophia looked up at his face, her cries faltering. Marcus began to move, swaying gently, the way he'd planned to do with his own daughter a lifetime ago. He couldn't hear Sophia's cries, but he could feel them vibrating through her small body into his arms. He could see her face, red and scrunched with infant outrage. Then Sophia did something unexpected. She reached up her tiny hand and placed it flat against Marcus's throat, right over his Adam's apple. Her crying stopped as she felt the vibrations of his voice box when he began to hum a tuneless, wordless sound he couldn't hear himself make but remembered from before, from when sound meant something. Sophia's eyes widened, fascinated by the feeling beneath her palm. She gurgled, then laughed, a sound Marcus couldn't hear but could see in the way her whole body shook with joy. And in that moment, in the touch of a baby's hand against his throat, Marcus felt something crack open inside him. This child didn't care that he couldn't hear. She'd found another way to experience his voice, another way to connect. She'd reached across the silence that had separated him from the world for 23 years and built a bridge made of curiosity and trust. Rosa watched in amazement as her perpetually fussy daughter settled in this stranger's arms. She saw tears running down the man's face, though he was smiling. She understood then that whatever was happening, it was bigger than a baby being soothed. It was something breaking and healing at the same time. Marcus reluctantly handed Sophia back after several minutes, and Rosa tried to thank him, but he held up a finger asking her to wait. He pulled out his phone and typed rapidly, then showed her the screen. "What's your name?" "Your daughter is beautiful." They talked through typed messages for the next hour. Rosa explained her situation, the late rent, the impossible choice between child care and work, the constant fear of losing everything. Marcus listened with his eyes, the way he'd learned to listen, and for the first time in years, he felt purpose stirring in his chest. He typed, "I own a building downtown. Empty apartment, 3rd floor. Move in this week. No rent for 6 months while you get on your feet. I'll have my lawyer draw up a fair lease after that." Rosa stared at the screen, certain she'd misread. "Why?" she typed back, her hands shaking. Marcus looked at Sophia, now sleeping peacefully against her mother's chest, her tiny hand still reaching outward, as if searching for connection even in dreams. He typed slowly, "Because your daughter reminded me that silence is just the absence of one kind of communication, and loneliness is just the absence of one kind of connection. Thank you for letting me hold her. Thank you for seeing me." 3 months later, Marcus Wellington still dined at table 17 every Tuesday, but now he was often joined by Rosa and Sophia. Rosa had enrolled in night classes, studying to become a nurse, while Marcus watched Sophia in his apartment upstairs from hers. He'd learned baby sign language and was teaching it to Sophia as she grew. She'd become the granddaughter he'd never had, Rosa, the family he'd thought he'd lost forever. The restaurant staff noticed the change in him, the way he smiled more, engaged more, seemed to take up space in the world instead of trying to disappear from it. And Marcus had noticed something too, that sometimes the unthinkable isn't a dramatic rescue or a grand gesture. Sometimes it's just a baby's hand on a lonely man's throat, reminding him that connection finds a way, even through silence. That humanity speaks in languages that transcend sound. That family isn't always blood, sometimes. It's the people who see you when you've learned to be invisible, who reach out when you've forgotten how to reach back. Every night before bed, Marcus would stand at his penthouse window, looking out at the city he couldn't hear, and thank Sophia for the gift she'd given him without knowing, the understanding, that he'd been alive all these years. But he hadn't been living, not until a cleaning lady's baby did the unthinkable, and reminded a deaf millionaire that the most important conversations happen heart to heart, where everyone can hear them perfectly.